Welcome to Luke's Kitchen, our humble little warehouse, test kitchen and office. Today we're very lucky, or this morning we're very lucky to have two of Australia's best chefs, cooks or whatever they may be. Well, they'll tell us what they may be. But they will, without doubt, inspire you, as they do me, motivate you and educate you about our industry and about their ups and downs they've had in this career. And this industry. And I think the nice thing is that we'll hear about the ups and downs, because there's ups and downs in everything you do. And you're at the age, most of you who are starting out, and wondering how we can continue all the ups and downs. But you do, and you can become successful like these two incredible ladies. So to start, we're going to show a video on why we started the Inspired Series program that you're here for today. So there you have it, why we started this series, and we're lucky enough to have the incredible Maggie Beer to start. So give her a warm welcome, please.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Maggie. Look at all these students. It's fantastic. Maggie, thank you for giving and donating your time for this morning to tell us your story, I guess, and how you got to where you are. But I guess a lot of, as we said, as I spoke to you last night, a lot of people are sort of deciding what to do with their career and where they want to go and things like that. So I guess my first question to you is, where did it all start for you?
Well, it started by absolute chance. I didn't have a plan, but it was all in front of me, and it has been a very organic life, if you like. But I grew up in Sydney, in the western suburbs of Sydney. Any Westies here? No one's going to be a Westie.
There's one, I think.
Oh, my gosh.
There's probably more. They don't want to admit it, maybe. I don't know. Not that there's anything wrong with being a Westie.
Well, I'm proud of being a Westie. Bankstown and then Wiley Park Girls High. But I left school at 14 from circumstances that I couldn't control, because my parents had lost their business and went bankrupt. And so I went out to work at 14. And I was always searching. I searched for 20 years of what it was I really wanted to do. So I was 34 before I found it. So think of how wonderful your chances are. You found it already, and you're about to find what can happen. But it happened for me because I was lucky enough to be brought up in a food household so long ago that you can't even conceive it, like your grandparents' age. And food was so important every day of my life. So I had that grounding that I took for granted. And I travelled a great deal, and then met my husband. We went to the Barossa. And the only reason it happened was because we were farming pheasants and no one knew how to cook them. And I'd never been taught to cook, but I always knew. So I just followed my instinct and cooked, because I loved it. And I can't believe I wasted all that time looking.
Well, so just take a step back there. So your parents, what was their business, if you don't mind me asking?
They were manufacturers of kitchenware.
Ah, so there was a link somewhere.
There was a link somewhere, yes.
Okay, so you said you didn't find your passion or calling till you were about 34.
Yes.
So you had good 15, 16 years.
20.
So there we go, 20 years, doing many different things.
Yes.
So what were some of those things, if you don't mind?
Oh, well, I probably had more jobs than black coffees, but I travelled a great deal. I travelled for 5 years, but I had jobs like a lift driver in a department store in New Zealand. I had a job in Libya as assistant to the geophysicist. I had a job in the sailing school in Scotland, and a whiskey barmaid in the Highlands. So there were so many jobs, and that's actually a bit of a clue. Yeah. So many jobs, and every time I was in a job, I put my whole effort into it, and I never stopped learning. So life is a bit like a jigsaw. you have pieces that make up the whole. And always, even though I wasn't in food, I did get one job in food in a sailing school in Scotland, at Lochern in Scotland, for the season. And I did 6 weeks. It was a 12-week season, and after 6 weeks they sacked me because...
They sacked you?
Yes,
wow.
Because I'd used the whole of the larder for 12 weeks in 6. So I only know one way, and that is to cook how I feel, and I love food, and I guess exuberance in food.
But you didn't know that, did you? Because from 15 or 16 to 34, you were going through all these different things to find what you were looking for.
Absolutely, and the cooking job just was sort of like a holiday job, and I had no experience, but they were desperate, and Aussies have a great reputation overseas for being hard workers.
Yeah.
So I didn't get the job because they thought I could cook.
So when you got to 34 and you found that passion for cooking, I guess, everyone needs to earn money and survive. That wasn't a reason to fall into cooking for you, or was it?
No. People might find this strange, but money has never been a reason for doing things. Making myself happy about what I am doing has always been what's driven me, and food has given me that. And in fact, we had a restaurant in the country called the Pheasant Farm, and it became quite famous.
Like an icon.
And for 11 of those nearly 15 years, we ran at a loss. But we were vignerons. My husband was farming and supported it. But that's not the way to go into business. Don't think that what I've done is a good example for you.
Well, hang on a minute. Look where you are now.
40 years later.
But we'll get to that. So I guess the point is you fell in love with the job, and the money wasn't your drive.
No.
The passion and the love for the job was.
It was about learning. I was learning often because I'd never been trained and just using my instinct. I was learning one step ahead of my customers, let me tell you. But I always knew I had an instinct for food because of this food life growing up. And the fact that even when I'm told now by friends who were at school with me, and as primary school, I used to bring food to school all the time. So it was only ever about loving what I was doing and relating to produce. I'm just a produce-driven cook. I'm not a technical cook.
But how do you get that? Does that just come to you? Did you wake up with that? You were born with it, or?
Look, I think many people are born with it, but they need the confidence and the interest for it to come out. Once you decide it's what you love, you might find that instinct within you, but even if you haven't got that instinct, you can learn, you can become so knowledgeable if you throw yourself into it. I mean, there's nothing else I want to do.
So I know you're one of the hardest workers in the business. I also know that you've called yourself a control freak, which you've said that. But
it's true.
Working hard and long hours is a bit of a problem in our industry sometimes, nowadays. And I don't think that's going to change. But, what would your message be to these young people who, when I was cooking, we'd be doing 60, 80 hours a week. And I'm sure when you were training, it was all the sort of same thing, and it wasn't for money. Now it's different. How do these people get where they want to be under the circumstances?
Okay. What I think is most important is if you have this feeling for food that I do and Luke does and Danielle and so many of us do, is go beyond what you're just being taught at the college or school. Really see it as something that the more you learn, the more you love to do what you're doing. So, I didn't learn from anyone, but I read all the time. I read every book, and you've got to remember I'm 74, right? So when I was starting, there were no books by Luke Mannion or Stephanie Alexander or anyone else for me to learn from. So I had to look past that to books that were translated from French women cooking. And what I gathered from that was this using everything available in the way of produce, but the joy of cooking, that's what I got from that. The joy of cooking, the joy of sharing, but it is hard work. But it never seemed hard.
And it probably still doesn't.
It still doesn't. I mean, I did this lunch for 50 at Coffin Bay on Saturday, and I don't work at the stoves anymore unless there's a special function. But I'm so energised by what I'm doing because I love it, and I love pulling it together. I love being proud of what I'm doing, and I love that people love what you do. That is something that is very seductive.
So how do you think from 34 to 74 you got where you are? Because you would have so many ups and downs, and so many downs that people don't hear about.
Yeah.
And all these young people, and in any business, they're going to go through downs and ups. How do you cope with the downs?
Well, I think I was a particularly lucky person in this strange way, having had such hardship when I was 14, because then I learned, that grit, that if you need to do something for your family, you do it, and you don't even think about it. You just get out and do it. So I had that background, and I also I never had an education that went beyond 14, as you hear, but I've got a lateral mind, and I have a positive outlook on life. And so I'm a problem solver. And I needed to be, because in our nearly 15 years of running the restaurant, we had flood, we had fire, we had pestilence. The birds got a disease, we lost everything in the floods, we had to start again. We lived in the country, it was difficult. I had to you couldn't get staff that had training, but that was a positive in my mind, because I could train people as I wanted to, but I didn't have the luck of finding people already trained that were in tune with me. So that was a positive and a negative. I had, in 91, most of you weren't born, of course, when we won the Restaurant of the Year for Remy Martin Gourmet Traveller, it actually was a wonderful thing. But after a year, it burnt me out, totally burnt me out, because...
So explain.
Because I'm obsessive, and I wouldn't leave the stoves. And all of a sudden, instead of being a small country restaurant, there are helicopters in the Ram paddock. Everyone from all over the country wants to come. And all you are is a small country restaurant doing the things you've always done. And I wasn't changing, but people's expectations changed.
So did you expect to win the best restaurant in the country?
No.
Did you? Was it ever a goal?
It was never a goal. And it's still a shock that we did, because all I was doing was following the seasons and using everything that I had to hand and loving every bit of it. But my gosh, when I look at the years of ups and downs, but the one thing I inherited from my mother was a joy in every day. And I have a partner, my husband, who was my supporter and believed in me before I believed in myself.
So a question, what would have been, in your cooking career or restaurant business career, the worst part? Was there a particular bad thing that happened and you just remembered getting through it because of your commitment?
Yes. it's really hard sometimes when you're not on, you can't be on song all the time. Let me tell you, there's no possibility of that. But I've got two really embarrassing times. One, I was filming with Floyd. Do you remember Floyd?
Floyd, I do.
Floyd. And remember, we live in the country. I opened a cupboard that we hadn't used because he wanted to put something in it and a mouse came out. That's just an aside. I remember having, in life sometimes you have really bad fights. No matter how much you love your partner, you can fight. And you can have to come to work the next day and 80 a la carte, and you're in tears, and you have the most important person, like the Premier of the state, coming to lunch who you admire, respect, and he has ordered something, and it was lost, and it was quinces, and it became something that blew up into something far more than just losing some quinces. And the devastation of letting someone down that you admire is one of the things that I can remember it so strongly. And we found later on that day when I was packing up, I actually found but it set me into a tailspin that I thought I just can't go on.
Right. So how long was Pheasant Farm open?
Just on 15 years.
Why did it close, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind. My husband came in one day and said, it's the farm, it's the restaurant or me, because I did not know I was burning myself out. I didn't recognise it in myself. And it was a split. I didn't have to think about it. He is more important than, my family is more important than anything. And, what was so interesting was that having made that split-second decision because of the way he was feeling, I said, okay, but 4 months to let everyone know. So we let everyone know that we were closing in 4 months, and it was the most amazing 4 months because I gave no choice to anyone. If I wanted to stuff pig's ears, I stuffed pig's ears. It was about going out on a high and having no regrets, only great feelings about what you'd done. But it took me a year to recover. I hadn't realised how burnt out I was. And that was because, all of a sudden we were, from this little country restaurant, we were in demand in a way that just took too much out of me, even though I loved it.
So that'd be pretty scary, closing your business after 15 years. And then what's going through your head? What do you do next? Yeah. I mean, you've got to survive. You've probably got bills to pay, like everyone else.
Yeah, well, it was... Colin said to me, you've got to... And look, you'll hear people say this and you won't believe it, but believe me, when someone says to you, sometimes in life you have to close a door to let another one open. And it can really be true. It was true for me. But I trusted... Cole sat down and said, look, we can survive. The grapes will come in, we'll still make the pâté, and that's how we'll survive. And I trusted.
It did, and it happened. And obviously, you've written 10 or so books, cookbooks, which is amazing. You've done a TV series. Tell us about the books and the inspiration behind them. I mean, there's so many of them, but did you see that as a business opportunity as well, or was that just your passion coming out?
No, I don't... years and years ago, I won Telstra Businesswoman of the Year, and all my friends laughed because I am so not a businesswoman. I am just driven by what I love. But the writing came about because the Advertiser, which is a South Australian major newspaper, rang me up and said, in Melbourne, they've got this Stephanie Alexander writing for The Age. We want you to write for us. And I said, come on. I left school at 14. I don't know about writing. And they said, look, just have a go. And why I had a go was I would, on Sunday, which was our biggest day in the restaurant, 80 people a la carte, almost all a la minute, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But I would toss up in the kitchen and say, okay, what's the most important ingredient in season we've used today? And then say it was eggplant. Okay, so I would go into the office and I had a typewriter. Before computer, we had typewriters.
I don't think they know what typewriters are.
And the one thing I learnt at school that was really handy was I'm very flexible and I typed at 100 words a minute, right? So I would sit at the typewriter and close my eyes and just write about what I was doing and what I believed about this ingredient and how I used it. And to this day, that is how I write a book. I send it off to the editor and I don't edit it. I just write because I love food, I love knowledge, and I love the way I feel about it. And so I just close my eyes and write.
Wow. So in this whole journey, was any of it to build the Maggie Be Brand, or it just happened? Because this is they all want to be you.
Well, it just happened. I had no idea that we had a brand. I didn't even know the terminology.
So when did you know? When did you realise that you had that brand?
I knew only about 6 or 7 years ago.
Seriously?
Yes, because I've been so busy in my business, my Maggie Be Products business. I'm the one that develops all the food ideas. Product development, they call it. And so I was always, I'm not, Colin is the one with a head for figures, and all I care about is quality and the ethos that I live by with food and making it happen. And so it was when we got the first person that came along and said, "I want to buy you." That's when I knew.
Just saying, wow. So let's talk about that. There's been some press about you selling half of your business, all of your business, but I know there's a little bit more to it.
Yep.
Because being that control freak that you say you are, and that beautiful mind that you have of developing things, tell us all about that business sale.
Okay, well, we finally have, or in fact, Monday is the day when we finally sell the business of Maggie Be Products that I have spent with my husband 40 years developing. It's like cutting off a right arm in so many ways, but I continue with the people buying the business for 2 years, but only 1 week a month instead of 12 hours a day every day. But still with the joy of developing the products, because that's what interests me so much. Flavour interests me, flavour and sustainability, but the farm where it all started, the pheasant farm, the farm shop, the eatery, the orchard house, all stays in the family forever. And the farm shop is the public face of Maggie Be Products. So any of you that travel and come and see where it all started can taste everything we make.
And you must, because it's incredible. Not long ago,
yes.
and amazing. So I might just throw the students, if anyone wants to ask a little question, and now's a good time because you don't want to be shy because you've got one of the best, incredible minds in the food industry. Anyone wants to ask a question? Yes. Yep.
Yes.
How do you think the Australian food industry has changed since you started?
I'll just repeat that. So how do you think, Maggie, the Australian food industry has changed since you started?
Okay, it's changed incredibly. And I was very lucky to be sort of almost on the ground floor of people realising how lucky we were in Australia with produce. And it just gets better and better and better. And that filtering down from restaurants to the home. And I've got to give a plug here for Lucy and the Delicious Produce Awards. It's been going, is it 12 years, 11 years?
13.
Oh, 13 years. I've been involved all 13 years. The Delicious Produce Awards, and you should get the Delicious magazine if you're interested in food, but we see this amazing growing up of farmers and value adders and the excitement of the food that we have to work with is beyond measure, and it sits with the best in the world. And we are the lucky country. I really and truly believe that. So it becomes more and more sophisticated along the way. But sometimes it goes off and gets too fancy.
It can, but you've been a big part of evolving this culture in Australia.
Well, it's about talking about food. It's about tasting food, understanding food, and understanding seasonality. It's becoming so much more important. It has become so much more important.
And what I love what you've done in your career and not knowing you're building a brand, that you give back, and you're giving back today, and you do that a lot, but also you've started your own foundation, which I think is an important message as well. You can get so much from the industry, but people like Maggie decide to give back, and that's very, very important. Tell us about that.
Well, when you've had the luck of all of these things have been the luck of my life. So to give back was just a matter of timing. And I was made Senior Australian of the Year in 2010. And I was asked to speak to 1,000 CEOs of aged care about food at an annual conference, and as a keynote speech. So I did a lot of research, and I saw some good things, but I saw lots of terrible things. So I've developed a foundation, and what I do is I'm trying to change the food in aged care across Australia. And
that's a massive job, I'd imagine.
It's the biggest job I've ever undertaken, but I bring together 30 cooks and chefs for 2 to 3 days, and I've just come from one such one in Melbourne, where I cook with them, I share with them all the things where they can make a difference and show them how they can be the most important person in the lives of those in aged care, because they can give joy as well as nutrition, because everyone needs pleasure in life. And then I bring the CEOs, the bosses in together and tell them how important the cooks and chefs' job is, the most important in the whole of this industry. The power sits with the cook or the chef to give something to look forward to in life for those that don't have the choice to cook for themselves. It's very, very powerful.
That is. Well, Maggie, you've been so generous with your time. I want to thank you on behalf of everyone here for giving up your time this morning, and hopefully all of you have taken something from Maggie's journey. And if there was one bit of advice on my last question that you would give to these guys, what would it be?
Love to cook. Cook because you love it. Never see it as a job, but something that's going to enrich your heart. That's the thing. Hard work, absolutely. But gosh, if you love it, it is so worth it.
Wow. There you go. Big round of applause for Maggie.